G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update for the 13th of July 2006. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, bringing you comprehensive news from both sides of the war and my opinions. And my opinions count, not so much the opinions of paid commentators from both sides who bring you only what they want you to hear. And most people only want confirmation of their bias. That's why you should never get involved in war, because there's always a loser. And lately, it's more likely than not both sides are going to be disappointed. Ukraine has not met its goals, Russia continues to advance, and the amount of people they wanted to kill, they're not meeting that target as well. Imagine putting out a everyday memo edict, I should say, from government demanding the military kill so many people a day. It's like, you're not going to get good outcomes when your priority is killing. So all you do is build enmity, and enmity eventually flows. It's an unfortunate reality of life. We have a lot of drone attacks on Ukraine, most of which Ukraine will never admit to or admit what was hit. But Russia's not complaining most of the time. But this is from yesterday. Some of the markers haven't gone down. They usually don't. But there are new markers and new movement in this zone. I remember when Ukraine claimed to have liberated this area, and now here they are claiming to be fighting on the same spot. Well, Russians are back in Kupiansk with a vengeance and still continuing to push, pushing on the front for the has not always yielded results, however, or major results was obvious, but nevertheless, this map has got some flaws in it, but most of the time it's pretty accurate, and the gains of Russia are small and not always noticeable on the map, with street fighting still in this region, over this town. Only some areas have fallen to Russia. Now, some maps put the Russians at this street, others it's the grey zone. This marks the approximate location of the Russian forces, and there's a grey zone between. Ukraine is fighting over this town still, but apparently it does go all the way up to here. There's fighting all the way up through here, and there's fighting all through this forest up to the road. Patrols are hunting each other. Oh, great. Hold on. I'm pausing. All right. After a little bit of time, the map unfroze. All right. Now, there's little pockets of growth in the Russian front line, but only minor growth here and there. No major town has fallen, but a town has fallen near Koshnikovia. Now, the map, for some reason, has decided to be slow loading. It loaded before fine and fast, but for some reason, it's now slow. I thought it was undergoing updates, but it's not, and some parts are sticking, which are weird. Even because there's Koshnikovia, the Russian forces have advanced, and they're advancing up through the satellite towns of Koshnikovia as well. Now, they haven't taken all of Novovinskia, but they've taken the last bits of Ivaninka in the north, Bertok and others, and little places here and there. The only one named in this latest advance is Priyut, and I believe that's the Russian name, not the Ukrainian name. Now, the Ukrainian forces here are under pressure, but they have not relented. But Ukrainians along here have retreated to the outskirts of town, and there's dueling over it still. Russia's claimed the town, but Ukraine hasn't fully retreated. The Russian forces have advanced here and there, but not everywhere. But they have started to, like I said they would, go through Dorpanilia, right, as they push, right, to get troops to retreat here. They have threatened their rear lines. The last thing you want to be doing is, and they're also threatening and pushing here, which is working. The Ukrainians are trying to desperately retake the same thing, strategy, come down the road, but they're starting to lose control of this road. They're trying to take retake Hulipol to put pressure on the Russian lines. Instead, they ended up losing more men, and the Russians trying to secure this road and push, the Ukrainians back as far as they can, which means they're going to come north of this town as well, and they're going to push up this as well. So far they're stuck here, but in other areas, they've still, the Ukrainians are coming through this town, as you can see from the map. This is the part I say that Russia may sacrifice in a peace deal, but first they want to destroy as much of this, if not take it. They want to make sure that Ukraine can't launch another war against them. And yes, I know what the popular theory is, but you really trust Ukraine to say we're the victims? How often has the left played the victim? The left has played victim so often, you're really going to believe Ukraine's a victim? After what? After all those decades of aggression, they're suddenly our friends, and they're victims of Russia. You really want to believe that? No, they want to alleviate their past guilt for World War One, World War Two, all the times they've put boots on other people's necks on behalf or with more in truth as part of the Russian alliance. They were willing to put their boots on the necks of others. And then, how many revolutions in Ukraine and the slaughters in Ukraine? They want it all swept under the rug, particularly Zelensky, because he and his ilk are responsible for, if you want to go by, if their theory, right, if the theory is that all white people today are guilty of slavery, then Zelensky and his people are guilty of all the crimes of Ukraine. Right. So, two can play this guilt game, and it's not going to come out easy. So, Russia has made small gains, but nothing significant on the Zaporozhye front as well. And, of course, as Kherson is Kherson. I don't know if, but it looks like for years now, Russia's holding. It's the same in the north. Most of the areas are not advancing. I believe they're being told to set up outposts and harass the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are starting to get used to that. That's a bad thing, because those outposts, Russia is only going to increase the number of outposts, like I said, to pressure the Ukrainians to leave. And if they turn their back, the Russians have shown they can and will pour 50,000 men suddenly into Kharkiv. And what are Ukraine's going to do then? Russia has increased the size of its army for the third time in 3 years. A little reminder that this channel is sponsored by you, the review audience, Empire Valves, that's one word, empirevalves.myshopify.com, for your one-stop shop of enchanting treasures based on my writing. Thank you for your purchase and your support. Each is a little bit of help that keeps me able to you need a new computer every few years now. They aren't built to last. Nor footage of destruction. Okay, Ukrainians ghost tank. Ukrainians testing a lot of weapons for Europe, particularly Germany and Poland. But they're always putting the label of, it's only Ukrainian. That's why England doesn't want to own the drone boats. Romania and other countries don't want to own. Finland don't want to own the drones. But Romania has publicly asked Ukraine to feed it information on the drones, which is all public cover for it. We're a shareholder too. We want a return on our investment. Yeah. It's the same with Hungary. I believe Orban is a victim of Ukrainian meddling, and right now Ukraine is trying to get their own back at Zelensky by putting public pressure on them as well. Now, this tank will remind you of if you're wargaming, you'll know the Sturmgewehr 4, but the Sturmgewehr 3 is the most common assault gun. It's the most produced armored fighting vehicle. It's the second most produced combat vehicle overall. Didn't help the Germans because they didn't keep up with the Russian heavy tanks, and they didn't have enough tanks for the Western Front, which allowed Patton's. That's often credited with the Sherman. It was actually later model of the Shermans and the Fury, which did the most damage to the Germans. Actually, Germans did the most damage to the Germans with sabotage of the Tiger 4. Had the Germans realised that the Tiger was a bad investment and continued with the Panzer IV and the Sturmgewehr, they probably would have won the war. They put their money in the wrong weapons. And Ukraine is now doing the same mistake. Trying to put their money on large-scale tank destroyers. And multiple Russian drones. This is what Russian drones are doing every day. You hear about hundreds of drones. Well, the average tank takes about 8. And you can see it is hit it hard. Now, there's the tank. And there isn't the tank. See? Sturmgewehr, assault gun. Don't tell me that they're not using World War II remnants for design ideas, nor inspired by Russian skirting or Soviet-era designs. This is right out of the book. I know its name very well. The Histories and Strategies of Land Warfare. Yeah. Ukraine is digging up World War II and past Soviet designs, trying to come up, and they're using some modern improvements from Soviet tanks, such as the BTR. If you look at it, it's very similar design to the T-15. Heck, I even show you if it's still available. This Wikipedia often take things down. And yes, you're going to have... There we go. Similar design. Right there. There we go. In development. There you go. See? Same... Because they all went to the same design school. Remember, most of your Ukrainian weapon makers all went to the same engineering and design schools as the Russian weapon makers. And they borrowed and stole from each other all through the course of this war. But there you go. Sturmgewehr. Right? What's the biggest problem with the Sturmgewehr? Vulnerable for the side, has to turn to aim its gun. Crew suffer concussion at a higher rate from the main gun. the tank gets highly inaccurate over time from the reverberations of the main gun, which often needs to be reseated. Eventually, you find its weak spot, and if you haven't secured that ammunition hatch, you're a dead man. And you've just taken your $12 million tank with you, or 10 million, whatever. Although the Russians do produce the Armada quite cheap. But there you go. That's the sleek armor there. The combined with the idea of mounting a higher caliber gun that, by removing the turret, you're able to mount a heavier gun. Next, we'll see the Jagged Panzer. Now, the Jagged Panzer, or the Uber tank, Jagged Panzer is tank destroyer. Now, it's similar. Again, low trajectory, high caliber gun. This was even more. The problem is to carry a heavy gun, a heavy anti-tank gun mounted on top of a tank chassis. As the top half of the tank was often lightly armoured, and to produce them faster, they ended up lightly armouring the whole chassis. Now, the heavier armoured versions were quite successful, but they were too few and far between. But the Americans found that the best thing was the 3 kilogram satchel. Basically, let the tanks advance, and the hidden troops surprise them with 3 kilograms under the tank. 3 kilograms of woo! Most tanks couldn't survive 2 kilograms of high explosive. Remember, shells don't have that much high explosive in them. So instead of hitting them with multiple shells, you just put it in one package and just give it a raw enema. All Russian tanks have the same vulnerability. Most of the Western tanks have slightly better belly armor, but still, I reckon most modern tanks will still be killed the same way as World War II tanks. Don't let the war movies fool you. There's a famous interview with Lee Marvin, who made a lot of war movies, by the way, and he was in World War II. He said, "We were fed crocodiles. That's not how the war went. It was mostly blood and guts, men on the ground." Yeah. Lots of men died trying to sneak up on German lines to hit them with bazookas from multiple angles, or plant satchel charges to in front of advancing Germans. But mainly, the victory was done by bombing the factories to slow down German production. And that's why the Ukrainians and Russians are at each other's factories all the time. That's why the war is so low intensity. If both sides are trying to preserve as much as they can for disruptions to production and supply lines. The Ukrainians always claim it's always the same amount. Only 8 or 9 got through because they found an acceptable number for people to swallow, like gullible guppies. Now, the Ukrainian army units have been alleged of reinforcing their men with Aidar battalions. Now, these Aidar battalions are civilian militia, or what they call the nationalist battalions. These are far-right-winged organizations that were banned. Right? These are not government entities, but they are turning to the what you would call the state militia. And what they do to extend the life of conscript units is fighters who are demobilized from the army are put into nationalist units, and these nationalist formations, there's no leaving, right? And they're left behind when the army retreats. They are often untrained. Those who survive usually ended up traded back for Russian officers. So there's no reason for the battalions to surrender either, which is a shame. Russia needs to lift its tactics if it wants to win, and Zelensky needs to up his game if he wants to stop the Russian advance. Neither side will change tactics too drastically. A radical change of doctrine would be more so in Ukraine than in Russia resisted. Putin has enough authority probably to get some change in tactics, but not enough because the Russians will not accept a large migration of Ukrainians. They're already sick of the ones they've got. They don't want the Ukrainians, so there's no offering peace to the army. And, again, it's only towards the last days of World War II did America decide that mass surrender of the Germans, like they did with the Italians, would be a good strategy. And it had worked, and it did work. Now, not all Germans surrendered, but enough that Germany was left undefendable. You don't know the truth, and I only know this because my grandmother lived through the war. You won't find these things in history books. My grandmother lived through the war. She knew people from refugee camps in Europe and relocations. Nobody asked who the Germans were. They all passed themselves off as other nationalities and were allowed to quietly relocate and given new identities. Operation Paperclip. A lot of Operation Paperclip did not relocate guilty people or scientists. A lot of the time it was relocations of people who were caught up and forced to work for the Germans, or Germans who had helped the Allies towards the end of the war. So don't think everybody in Paperclip is a villain. And I'm not talking from personal experience. I'm only talking about my grandmother's stories about people she met who quietly admitted to her in the Dutch community that they were really Germans, because they got caught out on their pronunciations of words. But because there were a lot of Germans along the Dutch border who spoke both languages, and they had helped the Dutch, though it was quite an unsuccessful operation still, and a lot died. But yes, it is hopefully never something will repeat. But Zelensky wants to repeat that tragedy for his own glory. He wants glory. And EU leaders, what do they really want from Zelensky's drone wisdom? Well, they want a return on investment. They've poured a lot of drones and a lot of drone technology into Ukraine, but Ukraine isn't dishing out the intelligence or the technology, and it's not shared. Taiwan has and other and it's not just the Baltic states. Taiwan and UK all want these drones and other technology. See, no one country's contributed any one thing to Ukraine, and Ukraine's so far, a lot of their drone factories in Poland are only staffed by Ukrainians, and more countries are frustrated that the drone technology they get is not. They're not getting the wreckage of Russian drones they wanted. They're not getting. They're finding that Zelensky's selling to the highest bidder captured Russian tanks, and those captures are getting rarer and rarer. In fact, you would see a headline if there was a captured Russian tank. Now, a lot of YouTubers have claimed captures that have been unsubstantiated. According to open source intelligence, you can find out when and the handful of tanks that have been captured intact. But most of the wreckage on both sides has been towed away very quickly. Russia's been able to recover most of their decrewed tanks. Now, Kiev has, another reason why, they're finding unidentified drones. Now, it's not just Ukraine. Israel and other countries have been flying their spy planes into, and so has UK, flying their spy planes into Russia. But now and again, they're all been deviating spy planes elsewhere, all sides, Ukraine in particular. And these planes are unmarked. They're all generic models. Some of them fashioned like Finland wants a return on investment. They want drones. They all want drones. They all want the latest combat information on drones. To give you an example, I watched a recent channel on robotics and drones. The computing power required to process a lot of this information will cost you and I around $15,000 an hour to rent. Now, Ukraine is getting tens of thousands of processing hours daily. You can imagine that's a lot of traffic Ukraine is getting for free off a lot of the big tech companies. You and I are paying for these tech centers, basically, for our taxes. It's not just America is paying, it's all of the West is paying for this war. And increasingly, even my own government wants returns on those investments. And Ukraine isn't giving it. Now, they want to share the know-how. Well, a lot of these drones have what you would call artificial intelligence. Now, I call them algorithms. Now, these algorithms are about detection and dodging detection. They have little CMOS chips that they warm up when they start feeling they can detect the electronics just by warming up. The electronic jamming warms these chips, and these chips can work out which direction based on topographical algorithms. I could do it hours of lectures on this, and most of it will go over most people's head, bore you to tears. But basically, they use simplified digital maps to plot courses to avoid detection. So they know there's a hill over there, they know to fly around it, stuff like that. These are all allegations. There is no proof any of this is going on. And some people are claiming these claims of AI are in fact thousands of Ukrainian operators flying these drones using headsets. And I think that's what Russia's pointing out here. There's no artificial intelligence involved. The tens of thousands of hours of processing is just signal intelligence trying to decode Russian communications. Right? That there is no actual AI drone swarms or anything like that. Otherwise, I think they wouldn't be asking for information. They suspect Zelensky's withholding information. I suspect he hasn't got the information to give. Now, the US have warned that for years that there is no that the US has claimed for years that they're particularly under Biden that there are no biolabs in Ukraine. Now that allegation went away until recently when Russia captured a hospital outside of Donetsk. The Donetsk Children's Hospital did not have any patients like Ukraine claimed or children. The locals told how people were lined up, children were tested at the hospital, but no one was ever treated at the hospital. And they found blood samples and genetic samplings in these biolabs. There were no hospital beds or surgeries that were in use. It was a hospital at one time, but it had become a funded biolab under Dr. Fauci. Now, I think Fauci's name was spread a little too far and thin. I do not think he was. I think he was like the executive producer of a large network of people racing to find the next vaccine for the next. Because the US makes a lot of money off vaccines, and I think there are diseases that have been discovered that make AIDS look like the common cold. And I think that there's a worldwide panic in order to find diseases and try and contain them before we have the next outbreak, like Ebola or airborne cancer. God forbid if that ever became a viral disease. Now, not all diseases are. See, some diseases are so fatal, they actually wipe themselves out because they kill their hosts and can't survive in nature without a host. But other diseases, if they could settle into something and live, then they become, yeah, if they could find a host that's able to be an incubator, yeah, that's the danger. So don't think every biolab is what it's claimed to be. I think Tulsi, however, they're talking about the stuff that was done outside of the purview of the US ban on bio research. Now, the US ban on bio research isn't a ban on bio research, it's only gain of function. And that actually was one of the few things that Barack Obama did right. He did ban it. There's got to be credit where credit's due. But his ban was ignored by his own staff and by Biden and his subsequent staff. Now, under Trump, a lot of these labs under the national intelligence disappeared from reports. CIA and no such agency hid from the US government the existence of these labs. And Tulsi Gabbard uncovered them. Now, you might say, didn't Tulsi Gabbard quit? No, she's on compassionate leave because her husband is dying. She did not have an argument with Trump. She went desperately to ask Trump, thinking that he wouldn't grant it, but he did grant her compassionate leave. She has still ongoing operations which she wants to see through, but she wants the appointed staff to do the work. But she will give her testimony on what she has learnt over the years in her position. Tulsi Gabbard never really went away. I mean, congresswomen and that, they often, after serving their terms, do government work. And Tulsi's been doing government work for over a decade now. So, yeah. And she knows people, and she knows people who know people. And I'm not saying that this isn't Russian propaganda, but all I'm saying is the best propaganda is the truth. And this is why Russia loves the US so much and also fears the US so much, is that they could put out information that they never would and admit to stuff that no other country would ever admit to, because it's not as damaging as Russia thinks it is. Although it is damaging to the ruling class, and that's why Russia is more fragile, because it has such a smaller ruling class than the US. In the US, someone's heads will roll. There will be someone under investigation, and the CIA will sweep under the rug. And by under the rug, think Jeffrey Dahmer. Okay, think what's the most public I could think of? Think Cuba, the fallout from Cuba, where three men who went to Dallas and did something did not end their careers peacefully or gracefully, but yeah, they were dismissed from the organization, but when upon their death, they admitted to what they did. And yet people still won't believe what they did in Dallas. They rather believe their conspiracies. But yes, three men from an organization within an organization known as Majestic 12, three of them who were part of the anti-communist league started by the CIA under Kennedy, yeah, believed he sold them out, so they took action. Yeah, but the most public of retaliations by the CIA has been the Kennedy assassination, allegedly, and other retaliations are more or less scrupulous, But they have, over the years, the CIA and FSB and the French and the English have all done things to people they believe to be traitors of the highest order. And that is, the British made sure that Philby never lived a comfortable or peaceful life. Sometimes they taunt people. They make their lives miserable rather than kill them. That's probably one of the most common things they do. Russia, they made some of their traitors suffer painful deaths. America, you just don't hear of them. Leavenworth has cells where people have no rights, like the FBI, one of the former FBI directors. You know, the Russians have penetrated the FBI better than America has let on, and this is the dangerous theory: is that the third man was never caught in the Great Breach, where they caught a CIA, an FBI, but they believed there was a third man in the NSA, which fed operational details such as Cuba, Angola, and Ukraine to the Russians. And this is why now they believe Russia's in such a poor position, because Russia became over-reliant on traitors in the West for intelligence and over-relying on past weaknesses and mistakes as predictions of future actions and reactions. If I was to guess, let's say America had a leader like Putin, who, after losing in Vietnam, decided 10 years later he would go back, right? Like Putin did with Chechnya and almost did with Armenia and other places. But let's say America had a long-term dictatorship who was just as, shall we say, enthusiastic as Putin. America wouldn't do the same wars over again the same way. Whereas Russia, right now, is re-prosecuting elements of the Chechen War, which is what's making them somewhat predictable right now. But if Ukraine is starting to dig up the past in order to gain some sort of advantage, this is a good look at the tank, by the way, and yeah, tanks are very confined, narrow views. Yeah. It's a Sturman gun. It's an assault gun, right? The tank, one of the weakness, no tracking. It has to turn the fire, right? They rely on external sensors almost entirely. They can be blinded quite easily, although they have multiple cameras just in case one does go out. But they're relying on past glories of their own war games, right, as well as German technologies. But the Russians know this tank. Look, it's as it approaches, it's looking for an exact point on the armor, and it cuts out before it goes in. So it's not giving away exactly where to hit the tank. See this strip here? It's lighting up under the line of hatches, probably around here, probably to hit the leading edge, just under it, to blast away the reactive armor, and is probably hiding the fact that there's probably one or two more drones behind it. That one goes off, and then a high-speed warhead will probably hit it from behind, or other drones, and basically blow the tank. It's creating what's called a sympathetic detonation of the ammunition inside. And I know probably of a few ways to deal with that. I know other engineers have most likely figured this out long ago. the problem is how to practically do this in a take, how to practically absorb an external explosion so that it doesn't create a sympathetic explosion. You're going to have to reduce the amount of ammunition you're carrying and focus on. See, there we go. See, lining up the 2 points on the armor. See there, coming in. It's coming in for this spot between the two, under this feed, or it's coming in under this gap. It's coming in somewhere between this area, where there's probably not a weakness, but there's probably probably counting on a shell being in that loader and exploding it. See there, all older designs. They're stolen goods, right? It's all based on captured German designs, captured German prototypes. See, look, it's also actually showing the only way it can elevate the gun is to use its suspension. That takes a lot of room. The gun is too big for the... Yeah, so they elevate the suspension. See, there's the gun. It has a feed loader. But it has a load of shells along the side of the wall because the gun is at the back. There's no ammunition here. It's either side, right, in the walls. And it's fed into the back. They take a shell out and just moves along. Every time one shell's taken out. Yeah. There's two gunners. A gunner and a loader. But they alternate. And yes, see? It's a Sturmgutz. It's a German tank. The Ukrainians are basically open. This is Ukrainians. This is the Ukraine army today. They might as well admit it. Okay? They might as well admit they're freaking Nazis. They're obsessed with recreating and re-prosecuting World War II, and they expect Europe to come in behind them. And increasingly, France is embarrassed. They've said, no, Nazis in Ukraine. Now they've shut up about that. Germany is embarrassed because one of its citizens is openly Nazi in a cafe in Ukraine. And they took down the YouTube channel about that. You look up Ukraine Nazi hunters, okay? Modern Ukrainian Nazi hunters. Ukraine is in a panic. They don't know what's gotten into Zelensky and they don't know what to do about it. Because the goddamn army and the goddamn nationalists have, and most of the people who would normally oppose this have fled. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. I feel sorry for the Ukrainians who have fled Ukraine because they have no idea what their country is turning into, because Canada in particular, and UK too, are feeding them a pack of lies about this war, and they sponsor channels that feed them a pack of lies about this war. And a lot of these Ukraine channels are telling them, we're going to turn this around tomorrow and march to Moscow, It's easy, I know, for a foreigner to not be invested in this war. So it's hard for Ukrainians not to be invested in this war, and it's breaking their hearts. So a lot of Ukrainians are tuning out, whereas other people who are worried that this war is going to conflagrate, and it will conflagrate unless Europe pulls out of this nosedive it's in. And people are working to slowly expose Ukraine as nothing more than a money laundering machine that's perpetuating this war in order to profit off the deaths of others, because the state takes the houses, they don't have to pay out the pensions, they write off all, there's no debts, they don't have to worry about any healthcare benefits to these soldiers or anything after this war. They're just trying to get rid of as many people as they can because they're country is so unstable economically, they think the only way out is to get rid of the excess population. Zelensky and his animals are basically taking all the property for themselves under the banner of the state. And the army and all these others, whether it's no matter which political party, you ask a Ukrainian about any political party and they all say the same thing. They're all corrupt. We don't know what to do. They can't start a new political party. They tried that and all it did is turn into corruption. There is no good answer right now for what to do in Ukraine because those with the power in Europe are corrupt. Europe has to clean up the corruption first in Europe. And the only way to do that is to get rid of the establishment. Now, it's not individual corruption. It's the corruption where you get large numbers of people just so dependent on the system, they perpetuate it. Rather than do the right thing to fix the economy, and that is reduce the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy, however, in Ukraine doesn't want to reduce because that means they get sent to the front. So, thank you for watching. Support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy merch. Please support the channel. Let's perpetuate this. 70% of you do not subscribe. 13% of you make it to this far into the video. Please subscribe. Let's get the numbers up. Let's get the information out. The only way to cleanse the corruption and the rot is to raise awareness, to red pill more people, to get the truth out there. I'm not trying to black pill people. I'm not trying to turn everybody against Ukraine. I just want people to wake up about Ukraine and realize what's really going on and realize that Ukraine is a victim of its own government and it's not. And blaming Russia will never fix anything in Ukraine. Bye for now.